Good morning, and welcome to the virtual worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and where we support each other on our spiritual search for truth and meaning. My name is Reverend Kate Wilkinson, and I am so glad that you have joined us this week. Today we celebrate the work and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is not a day just to celebrate the racial justice work that has been done by King and others in the past, but a time to recommit to carrying on their legacy in our present time and into the future. One of the decisions that we've made about this worship service is to highlight musicians of color who are contributing so much amazing music to our UU congregations as we navigate this difficult season of online worship. They have been creative and generous, and it's important that we support them accordingly. So we have invested in the musicianship of some musicians of color financially this morning by making small contributions to Lee Morris, Melanie DeMore, and the Overdue Promise Scholarship Fund. This fund provides scholarships for UU musicians who are people of color to attend their first Association for Unitarian Universalist Music Ministries conference. Support of this fund enables critical support and networking to our colleagues of color who are typically underrepresented and undersupported in our congregations. Our own choir also offers a beautiful anthem this morning. But first, let us ground ourselves for worship by each lighting a candle wherever we are, while I light our chalice here in the meeting house. In this way, we can feel connected, even while we are apart.
Let us wake up, not just from the Sunday morning exhaustion, from the wish for a few more drowsy minutes in bed. Let us wake up to this world we live in, to its beauty and wonder, and also to its tragedy and pain. We must wake up to this reality, that not all in our world have what we do, however much or little that is. We must wake up to the idea that our wholeness, our lives, are only as complete as the lives of those around us, of those we are inextricably tied to in a great web of mutuality, of which we are all a part of. Let us wake up. Let us stay awake. And now, in this time, and in each of the places where we are, let us worship together.
Love is the spirit of this meeting house. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace.
Last Sunday, we talked about opening our eyes to systemic racism and white supremacy culture. And we also talked about committing to keeping our eyes open, which is a much more challenging commitment. And while that metaphor fit very well in the aftermath of January 6, 2021, and the storming of the U.S. Capitol, it is not a new metaphor. In fact, it fit very well too back in 1966 at the Ware Lecture, delivered each year at the General Assembly of Unitarian Universalists. GA was held in Hollywood, Florida that year. The lecture was entitled, "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." The speaker was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King opened the speech by saying to the gathered crowd of Unitarian Universalists, "There are those wonderful moments in life when you speak before a group that is so near and dear to you that you don't feel like you have to engage in the art of persuasion. You don't feel like you are in the midst of strangers. You know that you are with friends. I can assure you that I feel that way tonight." My own personal experience with Unitarian Universalism, he said, began when I was a student at Boston University back in the early 50s. I can remember on several occasions visiting Arlington Street Church, where your distinguished Dr. Greeley pastored at that time. And I can remember beyond that, in the early years of my ministry, in the early years of the bus boycotts in Montgomery, Alabama, 3 of your ministers visited and encouraged me during that very trying and often difficult period. And I also want to acknowledge your massive participation, he said, in the events in Alabama during 1965. Then he continued, "I would like to use as a subject the church remaining awake during a great revolution. I'm sure that each of you has read that arresting little story from the pen of Washington Irving entitled Rip Van Winkle. One thing that we usually remember about the story of Rip Van Winkle is that he slept 20 years. But there is another point in that story which is almost always completely overlooked. It is the sign on the inn of the little town on the Hudson from which Rip went up into the mountains for his long sleep. When he went up, the sign had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down, the sign had a picture of George Washington, the first president of the United States. When Rip Van Winkle looked up the picture of George Washington, he was amazed. He was completely lost. This incident reveals to us that the most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that he slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up in the mountains, a revolution was taking place in the world that would alter the face of human history. Yet Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. One of the great misfortunes of history is that all too many individuals and institutions find themselves in a great period of change, and yet fail to achieve new attitudes and outlooks that the new situation demands. There is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution. The great question is, what do we do when we find ourselves in such a period? Certainly, the church has a great responsibility, because when the church is true to its nature, it stands as a moral guardian of the community and of society. It has always been the role of the church to broaden horizons, to challenge the status quo, and to question and break mores if necessary. I'm sure that we all agree that the church has a major role to play in this period of social change.
Hello, UU family. I'm going to sing a song with you called Shine on Me. It's an amazing spiritual that anybody can sing. And in these days when the things that we're dealing with, the feeling separate and all of that, and things seem so hard, this is one of those songs that you just throw your head back, put it in your medicine kit. All you have to do is ask. And here's how it goes. Shine on me, oh shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh shine on me, yes shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, lift me up, yes, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, hold me close, yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close. Yes, hold me close. So hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse please hold me close. Oh, shine on me, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Oh, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me.
King goes on to address exactly what we were talking about on Sunday, although we are apparently more than 5 decades late to the conversation. I think it is necessary to refute the idea that there are superior and inferior races, he said. It is out of this notion that the whole doctrine of white supremacy came into being, and the church must take a stand through religious education and other channels to direct the popular mind at this point. For there are some people who still believe this strange doctrine. Now, fortunately, I'm sure you don't have any Unitarian Universalists who believe this, he said, but it's a strange notion that has made for a great deal of strife and suffering. The white supremacy of 1966 was generally more subtle than in the past, King explained, but it was still very present. And he gave the example of whites in the 1960s saying things like, "The Negro is a criminal. You see, he has the highest crime rate in any city." In our day, this form of white supremacy takes the form of the question, but what about black on black crime? Whenever demonstrations take place about a white police officer needing to be held accountable for shooting a person of color. Those who use these arguments, King said, never say that if there are lagging standards in the Negro community, they lag because of segregation and discrimination. Poverty, ignorance, economic deprivation, social isolation breed crime in any racial group. It is a tortuous logic to use the tragic results of segregation as an argument for the continuation of it. It is necessary to go to the causal root to deal with the problem. So it is necessary for the church, he said, through all of its channels of education and through all of its work, to guide the popular mind and rid the community of the notion of superior and inferior races. The next thing that the church must do to remain awake through this revolution, King said, is to move out into the arena of social action. It is not enough for the church to work in the ideological realm and to clear up misguided ideas. To remain awake through this social revolution, the church must engage in strong action programs to get rid of the last vestiges of segregation and discrimination. The way to do this, he argued, is through legislation. His words rang particularly true for me this week as we debated the legal avenues for removing President Trump from office and as arrests were being made of those individuals involved in storming the Capitol. It may be true that morality cannot be legislated, he said, but behavior can be regulated. It may be true that the law cannot change the heart, but it can restrain the heartless. The law cannot make a man love me, he said, but it can restrain him from lynching me, and I think that's pretty important also. And so while the law may not change the hearts of men, it does change the habits of men. So it is necessary for the church to support strong, meaningful civil rights legislation. Here, King asked the gathered crowd to support various pieces of legislation around civil rights, and particularly around non-discrimination laws in housing. Housing was the key which would lead to other changes, he said. And we must not rest, he said. We must not rest thinking that things have come so far and we should be content with that. This is as true in 2021 as it was in 1966. I think we can all glory that things are better today than they were 10 years ago or even 3 years ago, King said. We should be proud of the steps we've made to rid our nation of this great evil of racial segregation and discrimination. On the other hand, we must realize the plant of freedom is only a bud and not yet a flower. The Negro knows more dignity today than he has known in any period of his history in this country, but he is not yet equal. There still are stubborn, difficult problems to deal with all over the country. I'm appalled that some people feel that the civil rights struggle is over because we have a 1964 civil rights bill and a voting rights bill. Over and over, people ask, what else do you want? They feel that everything is all right. Well, let them look around our big cities. I heard it said that the day of the demonstration is over, King said. This is something that we hear a great deal. Well, I'm sorry that I can't agree with that. I wish that I could say that the day of the demonstration is over, he said, but as long as these problems are with us, it will be necessary to demonstrate in order to call attention to them. I'm not saying that a demonstration is going to solve the whole problem of poverty, the problem of housing, the problems that we face in the schools. It's going to take something much more than demonstration. But at least the demonstration calls attention to it. At least the demonstration creates a kind of constructive crisis that causes a community to see the problem and causes a community to begin moving toward the point of acting on it. The church must support this kind of demonstration. As the days unfold, I'm sure that we will need this more. I think now of all of the Black Lives Matter demonstrations being held across the country after the murder of George Floyd. I think now of our monthly racial justice vigils here in Provincetown, and how Reverend Brenda Haywood has stood in front of Town Hall one Saturday a month for years, sometimes with hundreds of us joining her, and sometimes by herself. And some people have asked us, what is the point of these vigils? And sometimes we ask ourselves that. But we see that while they might not solve everything, they do cause a community to see the problem and cause a community to begin moving toward the point of acting on it. And so we keep that faith month after month. Our next racial justice silent vigil is Saturday, February 6th at noon in front of Town Hall, and you are all invited. Toward the end of his speech to the Unitarian Universalists gathered in Florida in 1966, King spoke about all of us wanting to be good people, well-adjusted people. And he ended with this: But I must say to you this evening, my friends, there are some things in our nation and in the world to which I'm proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon you to be maladjusted, and all people of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few, and leave millions of people perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of prosperity. However much criticism it brings, I never intend to adjust myself to the madness of militarism and to the self-defeating effects of physical violence. Yes, I must confess that I believe firmly that our world is in dire need of a new organization, the International Association for the Advancement of Creative Maladjustment. Men and women as maladjusted as Abraham Lincoln, who had the vision to see that this nation could not survive half slave and half free. As maladjusted as Thomas Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery, cried in words lifted to cosmic proportions, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." As maladjusted as the prophet Amos, who in the midst of the injustices of his day cried out in words that echo across the centuries, "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream." Let us be maladjusted until the good society has been created. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be.
Morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society. And it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. And I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
There is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down when the poor cry out for shelter and bread. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down, roll down. Remember, our hearts can make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let your love roll down like a mighty stream. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down, roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down, roll down. They can kill the prophet, but the dream lives on. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let justice roll down like a mighty stream.
I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.